All right, we're glad to have you for this lesson number 3 for the Christian Psychology class for Foothills College of Biblical Studies. And this is lesson 3, and we have so far looked at the introduction of the Christian Psychology course, and then also last week started talking about the 4 temperaments. And we're going to get into that more today. Before we do, I've got something here, Mr. Dakota Queen. I've got your personality scoring sheet, and you scored 8 on phlegmatic, 8 on melancholy, 12 on choleric, and 12 on sanguine. So you are a sanguine choleric, just like me, all right? And even 12-12. So you can study that some more and find out more information about that. Also, don't forget to send me emails. I've not received all of those for your lessons, homework on the first lesson and second. I got the majority of those. But maybe want to check and make sure you've got that in to me. But we're taking note of all that. But I want to go right into the lesson and talk today about the choleric personality. There are 4 personality traits that Dr. LaHaye is giving us. Let me get my book over here. I hope you're enjoying reading. I hope you are already getting into it, all right? And you'll learn so much. And so meet the 4 basic temperaments, and this is chapter number 3 in your textbook, and he talks about different ones, the sparky sanguine, and different ones, the rocky choleric, and the the maestro melancholy, and then the flip phlegmatic. And so great book. You'll enjoy this study. The choleric personality. This is what I am the majority of. When I was a child, I was more on the sanguine personality. I had a sanguine personality and had characteristics of the choleric. But over the years of being in ministry, getting older, maturing, becoming more like my father, Rebecca says, I have now come over into the choleric world. In fact, I scored high on choleric. I did the personality test again and scored very high. I think 24 on choleric, with sanguine being the second, and almost no melancholy, almost no phlegmatic, definitely choleric, sanguine. And so the choleric personality is pragmatic. Okay, what that simply means, he's practical, realistic, hard-headed, but we're realists, okay? We see the world for what it is, there's not much gray areas, black, white, okay? Hippocrates, we studied him in the first and second lesson a little bit. He says, he was on to something. He was wrong. Medical science in these days have proven that he was wrong, but he was on to something. But he said it corresponded with the liquids in our body. And the one in particular, he said that this personality had high levels of yellow bile. Okay, yellow bile is the hot fluid of the human body. Okay, and so it kind of makes sense because the choleric is hot, quick, active, in their temperament. Bam, things happen quick with the choleric. We can be from 0 to 100 in a split second. Write this down. This is number 1 on your homework, okay? Number 1, talking about the melancholy, sanguine, phlegmatic, and choleric. Here's something you need to understand. The melancholy and the phlegmatic, you have in your soul, you have your mind, your will, and your emotions, okay? Your body is your flesh, spirit is spirit. That which is born in the flesh is flesh. That which is born in the spirit is spirit. In the soul of man, you have your mind, your will, and your emotions. And that's where the 4 personalities come into play, okay? Your flesh is what it is. Your spirit is what it is once you've been saved. But the soul is where the spirit-controlled temperament comes in, okay? And all is key on the Spirit of God. And being filled with the Spirit, being led by the Spirit, not grieving the Spirit, not quenching the Spirit, not vexing the Spirit. Now, here's the thing. The mind, the will, and the emotion. Number 1, write this down. The mind is where the melancholy and the phlegmatic stay. Okay, they're going to be successful or failure based on their mind. The emotions is where a sanguine is either going to be successful or failure. And the will is where a choleric is either going to be successful or fail. Okay? It's very important to understand. The mind is the realm of the melancholy and the phlegmatic. The emotions is the realm of the sanguine, and the will is the realm of the choleric. So that's pretty awesome right there. That can help you understand your personality and what you need to key on. I need to focus on my emotions, and I need to focus on my will. Okay, my mind as a choleric is pretty much made up. All right, but my emotions as a sanguine are like this. Okay, but my will is where I need to focus because I'm predominantly choleric now. So I need to focus on that will. Now, this lesson is pretty awesome. In this lesson, we're going to look at the strengths of a choleric. So if you're a choleric personality, you're going to enjoy this lesson because it's going to talk about a lot of things that are good about you, okay? But don't get too happy in yourself because the next lesson, we're going to talk about the weaknesses of the choleric, okay? I am not looking forward to that lesson. But let's talk about the strengths and pat me on the back. Here we go. We're going to talk about my strengths, okay? And if you're a choleric, you're going to talk about your strengths. And every personality has strengths. And so we're going to deal with all four, and you're going to enjoy that part. You're not going to enjoy the weakness part, but I tell you what's going to help you. Not learning how strong you are. What's going to help you is learning how weak you are and how the Holy Spirit and His control in your life, being filled with the Spirit, can make your weaknesses diminish, and you can go more towards your strengths. Now, the leadership of a choleric. I'm telling you, cholerics are natural born leaders. And we're going to learn in this lesson a little bit about King David, how King David was a choleric personality, and how he exuded these strengths, these traits. And you need to understand right at the start of this lesson that cholerics don't need your approval. So if you don't like this lesson and you're not a choleric, we don't care. We don't care. All right. We don't need your approval. And that's just the way it is. And so understand that. Now, here's the way David Moore, before we get into 1 Samuel 17, you can go ahead and turn in your Bible there. 1 Samuel 17 is where we're going to be. But there was a writer by the name of David Moore who also wrote about 4 temperaments. This is number 2 on your homework that you need to email me. The breakdown of the world in percentage. How many people are melancholy? How many people are choleric? How many people are sanguine? How many people are phlegmatic? Well, here's the breakdown. 45%, write this down. Melancholy make up around 45% of the population. The second one is sanguine. Sanguine make up around 30 to 40%, around 35% of the population. Melancholy make up 45. Sanguine make up about 35%. The phlegmatics make up about 10% of the population. And the cholerics are the smallest group, okay? They make up about 7%, okay? And that can vary, okay? But that's just kind of a 45, 35, 10, 7, give or take a couple percentages. But the majority of people are melancholy. Second majority is sanguine. Then the small group phlegmatic, and then a very small group of choleric. Now, the Bible characters are pretty awesome. And when you talk about characters in the Bible, melancholy, 45% of those folk are like John the Apostle John the Beloved. Then you've got the choleric personality, 5 to 7%. That's like the Apostle Paul, King David, okay? And then the Bible character that would describe a phlegmatic is going to be like Abraham. Timothy was a phlegmatic. And then you've got your Simon Peter sanguines who are constantly putting their foot in the mouth, but they also are the life of the party. They make everything interesting. They are the ones that everybody wants to hang out with. I mean, Peter looked at the boys and said, I don't know what y'all going to do, but I'm going fishing, And so, sanguines are pretty awesome people in their strengths, but they also have some glaring weaknesses. We'll talk about that in the lessons coming. Now, Tim LaHaye, that's number 2 on those percentages. 45% are melancholy, 7% choleric, 35% sanguine, and about 10% phlegmatic. Now, Tim LaHaye talked about it like this, and we closed last time's lesson on this. You've got the easy way, which is the phlegmatic. You've got the right way, which is the melancholy. You've got the happy way, which is the sanguine. And you've got my way, which is the choleric. Okay, the choleric is the my way or the highway guy. Get out of my way. I can do this by myself. I don't need you. I don't need you. I don't need you. I don't need you. I got this. And most of the time they do. And most of the time they perform. And most of the time they get the job done. They might hurt some feelings along the way, but they get the job done. A good example, now a present example of a choleric personality. There's a current example right now, big in our world. You're probably already thinking of who it is, and that's President Donald Trump. President Donald Trump is probably almost 100% choleric. He can get the job done. He is a natural born leader. Rubs people the wrong way. He's a my way or the highway, but he's a leader. And he's what this nation needs. And if you don't like that, you can just go ahead and cut this off. But it's all right. He's a natural born leader and doing a phenomenal job. Does he make people mad? Yes. Does he say things the wrong way? Yes. Does he act like a goob sometimes? Yes. But he's a leader. He's choleric. So there's the right way, the easy way, the happy way, and there's my way. We're going to talk about choleric today. All right. Florence Littauer was a writer. She actually died this year in July. She characterized the choleric in one word. She characterized them as the word powerful. Write that down. Florence Littauer. That's spelled Littauer. Florence Littauer described the choleric in one word. Powerful. Okay? Powerful. That's number 3 on your homework to be turned into me. Now, what we're going to talk about is how I like using Bible words. The Bible uses the word soldier. We're soldiers, okay? And I would say that we could call the choleric the soldier, all right? And so write this down. Number 4, let's characterize the 4 personalities. We'll characterize the choleric as the soldier, okay? And we will characterize the sanguine as the star. Write that down. The sanguine is the star. The choleric is the soldier. The phlegmatic is a shepherd, okay? And we'll talk about these later. And then the melancholy is the saint, okay? The soldier, the star, the shepherd, and the saint. The soldier choleric, the star sanguine, the shepherd phlegmatic, and the saint melancholy, all right? And we'll talk about all of these over the next 6 to 8 lessons. Now, let's talk about the soldier. Go to 1 Samuel chapter number 17. And I won't read all of it for sake of time because I'm only 13 minutes in. This thing goes by so fast. But in 1 Samuel 17, it's one of the greatest passages in the Bible that we love and we're familiar with about Goliath and how the Philistine armies were coming against Israel and the Israelites were in fear. And little David shows up, and he's just a little boy, but he's choleric, and he can do it, and he can get the job done. I want you to notice this. The Bible said in verse number 22, all right? Here's the thing about a choleric. You need to understand. Cholerics usually are the ones that become the heroes, okay? They're willing to jump into the fight. They're willing to get their hands dirty. They're willing to get bloodied. They're willing to, take risk to get the job done. And he comes on the scene. David comes on the scene with the Israelites, and the Philistines are there, and the champion Goliath in the valley of Elah. And the Bible, look what the Bible said. 1 Samuel 17, verse 22. The Bible said David left his carriage in the hand of the keeper of the carriage, and watch this, and ran into the army and came and saluted his brethren. He ran into that situation. All right. Here's the thing. There's some strengths, 9 of them. I want you to write this down. Number 5, and this is the last one, but there's 9 strengths that I'm going to give you. Number 5, put this at the heading. Strengths of the choleric. Strengths of the choleric. Number 1, we stand out. As a choleric stands out in an emergency. Look at David. He ran to the battle. He ran to the battlefield. And when he gets there, he made a difference. That's a choleric, okay? Cholerics stand out in emergencies. Not all firefighters are cholerics, but you know which one's going to lead the charge into the house? It's going to be the choleric. Not all soldiers in the army are cholerics, but do you know who's normally going to go up in the ranks? Choleric personality. Not all pastors are cholerics. Not all leaders in the church are choleric, but do you know who's going to take charge and take the lead? It's going to be the choleric. They'll always stand out in an emergency. When things get tough, when things get hard, a choleric will be there, and they'll stand up and say, hey, this is the way it's going to be. We're taking our stand. We're going to do this way, and they'll lead the charge. And guess what? They're natural-born leaders, and people fall in right behind them and say, I believe in you. I believe in you. That's a choleric strength. All right, number one, they stand out in emergencies. Now, this is 5. The strengths of the choleric. Number one, they stand out in emergencies. Number 2, they are never stunned by opposition. Never. Opposition. Listen, going back to President Trump, do you think he cares? Only he could have handled the last 3.5 years with all that opposition that has come, ridiculous opposition. You know, if there's something to really stand upon against a man, I can understand, but there's just been complete nonsense brought against him. He just shrugs it off and goes to work and gets the job done. That's the way we see David here. Look what the Bible said. The Bible said his brothers came and rebuked him. I think it's verse number 28. And Eliab, his eldest brother, heard when he spake unto the men, and Eliab's anger was kindled against David. And he said, why camest thou down hither? And with whom hast thou left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know thy pride, the naughtiness of thine heart, for thou art come down that thou mightest see the battle. And David said, what have I done? Is there not a cause? He didn't care. He just come right back at him. He shows that he's not stunned by opposition. We are strong-willed. Cholerics are strong-willed people. They thrive on opposition. In fact, the more you oppose them, the more tenacious they become. And it's like Dr. Gene Goodman, one of the instructors where I went to Bible college at my dad's Carolina Bible College years ago. He said this, I'm dogmatic about some things, I'm dogmatic about a lot of things, but there's some things I'm bulldogmatic about. That's choleric, okay? They're not the least bit threatened by adversaries. They're willing to fight. You don't back a choleric in a corner, they will come out swinging. They're not threatened by adversaries. In fact, if there is an adversary, it just stimulates them to work harder, okay? And we will work ourselves to death to prove to our adversaries we can get the job done. And that's the truth. The Apostle Paul, all right, we're talking about David, but let's talk about Paul. Paul was strong-willed. Paul was a choleric. His adversaries were around every corner. And the more they criticized him, the more he dug in his heels, okay? Listen to the Bible. Philippians 1:28. And in nothing terrified by your adversaries, which is to them an evident token of perdition, but to you salvation and that of God. You know what he's saying? Don't be intimidated. It's a sign to them they're going to be destroyed. Don't be intimidated. That was the attitude of the Apostle Paul. Listen what else he said. In Acts 20, you get a real glimpse in the choleric personality of Paul. Serving the Lord with all humility of mind and with many tears and temptations which befell me by the lying in wait of the Jews. And then verse 23 said, save that the Holy Ghost witnesseth in every city, saying that bonds and afflictions abide me. But look what he said in verse 24. But none of these things move me, neither count my life dear unto myself. That is choleric. Don't move me. I'm going on doing what I do. I'm going to serve the Lord. Cholerics stand, man. They know how to stand for God. It is one of their strengths, okay? Now, listen what else he said. Acts chapter 21. Talking about not being stunned by opposition. Okay, this is a strength. But sometimes that comes with a little sarcastic attitude. Okay, and you can hear some sarcasm in Paul's voice in Acts 21, verse 10 through 13. The Bible said, then Paul answered, what mean ye to weep and to break mine heart? For I am ready not to be bound only, but also to die at Jerusalem for the name of the Lord. What mean you to weep and to break mine heart? There's almost a little sarcasm there. Paul, son, he was a choleric, all right? And so cholerics are bullheaded. They're stubborn. We get set. We get set on a situation and you cannot sway us. That can be a good thing, but it can be a bad thing. He said, I'll not be persuaded in verse 14. So a lot of times we get bullheaded and stubborn, but it can cause us to do stupid things. My daddy's a choleric, okay? And whenever we were young, we lived on a Greyhound bus. And we traveled across the country, and Dad preached, and we sang. Well, we were remodeling the bus one day. Me and my brother Andy and my dad, we were remodeling it, tearing things out, building things. And there was this piece of plywood that Dad had for us. And me and Andy were building a closet. And we were trying to get the plywood into this closet, but there was a wheel well where the front wheel of the bus was. We were having a hard time getting that in there because it was wedged. Well, my daddy, being the choleric that he was, said, get out of the way, I can do that. And he kicked it in, okay, got it in. That was about 10 o'clock in the morning. Never said anything. But what happened, we found out about 9 o'clock that night that when he had kicked that board, he had busted his big toe. The toenail had come completely off. And when he took his foot off, when he took his boot off working, his whole sock was red because he did not tell us all day long. And he finally admitted that night when we all saw that his sock was blood red, he finally admitted that he hurt his foot at 10 o'clock that morning, but was so stubborn that he would not tell us that he had hurt himself. That, my friend, is a choleric. Number 3 on these strengths, okay, this is 5. I guess you could go A, B, C if you want to do it correctly. So C, a strength of the choleric. Not only are we stand out in emergencies, we are never stunned by opposition. But here's the third one, okay? The third one is this: we're goal-oriented. A choleric is goal-oriented. Look what verse 29 says. Is there not a cause? Is there not a cause? That statement by David shows that he is a choleric. He is a goal-oriented person. The word cause is a purpose. Is there not a purpose? Is there not an objective? Is there not a point to this? Is there not some aim? Do y'all not have a goal? What is your motive for doing this? That's how a choleric talks to people, okay? Typically, a choleric is successful at whatever vocation they choose, not because they're gifted in that vocation, but because they're relentless. A choleric is relentless. They strive for excellence. God has blessed the ministries that I have been a part of. I went to Walters Grove Baptist Church back in 1997 with about 50 people. And I had people tell me, I had one preacher say, God's going to move you to a church one day where you can do something. Kind of made me mad because I knew God was going to do something there. You know what? I can think of the guy's name. I'm not going to say his name. Who told me that? He's already in heaven. But that pushed me. That pushed me because I'm a cleric. And God blessed that. God blessed that relentless attitude I took. We saw growth over 15 years there. From 50 to the last year I was there, we averaged 475 in attendance. I had another preacher tell me one time, well, let me say something else. When we come to Thanks to Calvary, we had 19 folk. And, you know, I had one lady walk out the night that they voted on me, and she said, you got more faith than any preacher I've ever met to take this church. And you know what? That didn't discourage me. I took that, put it on my shoulder and said, bless God, we're going to build this church. That was my choleric. And so it has some pluses. You know, it causes you to push. I had a preacher tell me, Brother Joe Arthur told me one time, he said, Brother Jeremy, when I was a young preacher, he said, you do not have to knock a home run every time you preach. And but you know what I took that as? I'm going to knock a home run, Brother Joe. I am going to swing for the fences every time that I get up. And so we're goal-oriented. All right, we don't know how to relax. We have activity all the time. We live in a world of work. Chris Collins works. He lives to work. All right, he doesn't work to live. He lives to work. And we're just poor, pathetic, driven people that nothing is ever good enough. We always have something higher that we are pushing for. You say, but Brother Jeremy, you've reached 200 in your church. I'm going for 300. When I get to 300, I'm going to 400. When I see 400, I'm going to 500. That is my personality. So C, we are goal-oriented. D, let me give you this. They do not need approval, okay? I've already mentioned this, but this is a strength. Verse number 30. And he turned from him toward another and spake after the same manner. Okay. Eliab has just criticized him. He said, is there not a cause? And then he goes and looks right at another one. He was not deterred. He was not detoured by the disapproval of Eliab. Okay. And we don't need approval. Cholerics do not need approval. David did not need the approval of his own flesh brother. He did not need the approval of Saul. When Saul tried to put the armor on him, David was so independent. And he said, Saul, I cannot go with these. I've not proved them. And David put them off. That was a cleric. Not only was that a wise thing, but it was also a part of his personality. He did not want to fit in anybody else's mold. He wanted to be who he was. If you criticize a choleric like Saul did in suggesting he wasn't armored enough, David going to look at Saul. I'm surprised he didn't look at Saul and say, well, big boy, if you can fit in that armor, how come you're not on the battlefield? And basically that's what he did by taking that challenge. He threw everybody on that hillside under the bus and said, why ain't y'all doing something? Y'all going to leave this up to a little child, to a little teenage boy? You want to leave it up to a dog? What Goliath called him? I guess so. But guess what? I'm choleric. I'm going to go get the job done. Pow! Goliath fell down. So, David could have looked at Saul in so much words, said, if you're so big and bad, why don't you go out there and fight the giant? And so that's a strength. We don't need approval. Here's another one. E, all right? The soldier thrives on opposition, okay? We thrive on it, all right? This is very important. Not only are we not stunned by opposition, but we thrive on opposition. When we have someone come against us, it doesn't make us worse. It makes us greater, okay? We have a resolve to fight against opposition, to overcome it. In fact, honestly, we delight in opposition. We delight in competition. We delight in somebody telling us we can't. We love it. It's like, oh, yes, I can. Watch this. We pick up everything and we go. I've noticed in my dad's ministry over the years, being in the preacher's house, I knew when he was going through a storm in the church. You know when he did his best preaching? When things were not good. Rebecca's told me the same thing. When I am under so much pressure and something's gone wrong, she's told me, man, that was the preaching that we need right there. And so that's a choleric. All right. Then F. All right. Another strength is a natural born leader. Cholerics are natural born leaders. Okay. Look at verse 32. Let no man's heart fail because of him. Thy servant will go and fight this Philistine. All right. Y'all see that? Let no man's heart fail because of him. Thy servant will go and fight with this Philistine. Here's just a child, a young man, and yet he has taken the lead of the Israelite army. Natural born leaders. Take the bull by the horns and get the job done. Now, let me give you some famous cholerics, all right? How about Thomas Jefferson? Thomas Jefferson was a choleric. Abraham Lincoln. Dwight Eisenhower. General MacArthur. Napoleon, Albert Einstein, Bill Gates. These are on the positive side. We could talk about some negative too, but it's not this lesson. We're patting ourselves on the back, okay? And so there are some great leaders in the past that had that choleric personality. Again, 7%, a little less than 7% of all population are choleric. And here's the thing. They're typically optimistic. No challenge is too great. We can handle this. We're going to get through this. Everything's going to be okay. I tell my wife that all the time. She leans to me to say that. Everything's going to be okay. And if I'm in a mess, she's in a mess. She's told me often, I can take anything as long as I see you strong. And you know what? That helps, because guess what? Most of the time I'm like, it's going to be all right. We got this. Everything's okay. Oh, she's over there. Man, the offerings weren't good today. I'm like, they'll be back next week. Oh, we had 25 people out today. We're good. Church is all right. Let's go get something done. That's me. Okay, that's just my personality. They find it easy to make decisions for themselves. And anyone else who hesitates in the decision, they push them out of the way. Lead, follow, or get out of the way. That's a theme for the cholerics. And another here, whoever wrote this statement was definitely a choleric. If you aren't the lead dog, the view never changes. That's pretty good. If you're not the lead dog, the view never changes. How about this? Here's another strength of a choleric. G, the soldier choleric has little desire for friends. All right, we don't have to have friends. We do have friends, but we don't have to have them. That you say, but preacher, that's a weakness. Yes, we'll talk about that next week. But it is also a strength, because it means we know how to stand on our own 2 feet, and we don't have to worry about having someone in the battle with us. David walked right out there in the middle of that valley with nobody but God, and did the work. Here's another one. Rebecca, are you listening? Rebecca, listen to this one. Cholerics are usually right. They're usually right. 1 Samuel 17:37. The Lord that delivered me out of the paw of the lion and out of the paw of the bear, he will deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine. Cholerics have the perception to make judgments that are usually right, okay? And this story, you go and read chapter 17, it proves David was right. Let me illustrate this, and I'm almost done. I got to hurry because I've gone 32 minutes. My grandmother was a choleric, my dad's mom. My dad and my grandmother were a lot alike, okay? My grandma, Evelyn Simpson, she was choleric, okay? My grandfather, Howard, who was a pastor, he was phlegmatic. Jeremiah is a lot like my grandfather, okay? Now, grandma would be real critical. Not necessarily critical, but it's like she could see something before grandpa could see it, okay? She would see things that he wouldn't see, and she would tell him, you need to watch that person. That person right there is a snake in the grass. And my grandpa being a phlegmatic, wanting to keep the peace, he would say something like, oh, you're too critical. You shouldn't worry about it. And guess what? My grandma, she was most of the time right about it. She could peg people. She could look at somebody and say, you better watch that person. And guess what? Might take a couple years, might take 10 years. Sure enough, she was proven to be right. That choleric has that ability, okay, to be usually right about situations. Here's another one. This is I. That was H. This is I. A choleric can run anything, all right? The soldier can manage any situation, usually can operate any type of equipment. David in verse 49 uses a sling and a stone. And then he goes over and takes Goliath's sword and chops his head off. So this is a cool lesson tonight about the choleric. Turn those things in. There's 9 of those strengths, 5 total questions. And these are the strengths of the choleric. I hope this is a blessing for those of you that, are choleric. For those of you that are not, you need to learn this trait, because maybe you have a family member that's choleric, that you could appreciate some of these things that maybe you've not appreciated. And then next lesson, we are going to go into the weaknesses of the choleric. Hope it's a blessing to you. And we'll see you on the next lesson. God bless you.